Hello everyone, welcome back to another EBHRC, East Brunswick Human Relations Council event. So the EBHRC is a council appointed by Mayor Brad Cohen, and its main focus is to plan events that foster inclusion, acceptance, respect, and diversity across the township of East Brunswick. So our Coffee and Conversation series has been going on for a couple years now, where we tackle various issues such as racism and ageism, all the way to bias and stereotypes. Tonight, our Coffee and Conversation will be focused on the topic of metamorphosis. I've invited a couple educators here today to speak on the topic. First up, we have Ms. Kenny Stein with her speech titled Confessions of a Former Drama Queen.
We good? Okay. Hello, everybody. My 8th grade yearbook quotation reads, "OMG, guys, I'm so depressed," or something like that. Was I depressed? Sure. Sometimes. Other times, I was bouncing with joy, or quietly thoughtful, or just blah. I was a typical 8th grade hormonal mess who wore all of her emotions on the surface. I was self-conscious, I was occasionally jealous, and I was constantly reinventing myself. Maybe this was just a phase, but it continued through high school. I was consumed with comparing myself to other people. I felt at times invisible, and at other times, too much in the spotlight. I cried easily and often, but other times, I was the life of the party. I was loud, boisterous, and animated, a bubbly clown. I hated myself for these mood swings. I felt like my emotional state was a burden to my friends who had their own teenage issues. When I'd complain to my mother, she'd tell me to get more exercise, which was good advice actually, but was really annoying at the time. Then, the unthinkable happened. In July, before my senior year of high school, my father was diagnosed with cancer. 6 months later, he died. There is something about real loss that puts the other teenage drama in perspective. It's like being plunged into an icy lake, and once you come up for air, you sting and shiver until you grow numb. Sometimes my mother, sister, and I found ourselves laughing at the absurdity of the situation. How could he be gone? It couldn't be real. Could it? Just as quickly, the laughter would turn to full-bodied sobs. After his death, I had every excuse to be a mess. I could have kicked my drama queen persona into high gear. Instead, I removed that gaudy crown and I hid it under the bed. Drama had no place in the face of real pain. Instead, I decided to try and be the person my father would have wanted me to be, a thoughtful, warm, happy individual who wanted to make the world a better place. I recognized the thoughtfulness of the people around me. The assistant principal who drove through a snowstorm to get me to the hospital to see my father. My best friends who pulled an all-nighter to make me a mixtape. A classmate I barely knew who had lost his mother and reached out. The directors from my summer camp and many others who traveled far to attend the memorial service. My elementary school best friend with whom I'd lost touch, who showed up on my doorstep, speechless with her own grief at the death of a man who she had grown up with. The people around me were amazing. In the midst of the devastating loss, I felt so much love. This happened over 30 years ago, and I still carry both the loss and the love around with me in everything that I do. I still wish it never happened. I would love to still have my 6'7", brilliant, empathetic father with his ridiculous, chortling laugh part of my day-to-day life. I wish that he could have met my children and my husband, whom he would have adored. However, I also know that part of who I am, perhaps even the biggest part, has come from losing him. It changed the kind of friend, student, daughter, and sister I was at the time, and it has made me a better wife and mother in my current life. My father, who was a lawyer, admired teaching more than any other profession, so I can't help but think that this guided my choice of profession as well. A choice I'm thankful for even on the hardest days. After I wrote the first draft of this speech, I decided to see what others had written about the transformative nature of loss. Was my experience universal? It turns out, in many ways, it is. Author and podcaster Nora McInerney has given a TED Talk that has almost 7 million views. In it, she takes exception to the phrase moved on, as in, have you moved on? Or I'm so happy to see you've moved on. McInerney, who lost a pregnancy, lost a parent, and lost her husband within 4 months of each other, but has since remarried, says that she still talks about her first husband in the present tense because he is still with her. She says, Aaron's present with me in the work that I do, in the child that we had together, and in my marriage to Matthew, because Aaron's life and love and death made me the person that Andrew wanted to marry. So I've not moved on from Aaron. I've moved forward without him. I totally agree. I have not moved on, but I have moved forward. Losing my father taught me my own strength. That's what the hardest points in our lives can do. They can, if we let them, help shift our values. As hard as they are, they can be an opportunity for growth. I wish my father hadn't died young. I still miss him, but I am who I am in large part because of both having him in my life and from surviving his loss. As for that drama queen crown, it still lurks under the bed, and occasionally I think about dusting it off and wearing it again. But to tell you the truth, it doesn't fit me anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kenny Stein, for your speech on the importance of learning from loss. Next up, we have Ms. Spivey with her speech titled, My Unlikely Journey into Teaching.
Hi. If you had told me during my senior year in high school that I would end up standing in a room talking about being a teacher, I would have told you that aliens had obviously snatched your brain because there's no way that's happening. I remember there was a banquet for students who were getting scholarships and awards that were chosen by the teachers. A bunch of my friends got scholarships because they wanted to go into education. I told them they were crazy. We were finally done spending our days surrounded by annoying teenagers. Why would they want to do this for the rest of their lives? I had a much greater purpose. I was going to college to study international relations. I wasn't positive what I would end up doing with my degree, but I knew two things for sure. I was going to end up making way more money than my teacher friends, and I was going to save the world. You might be wondering how it is that I'm standing in front of you as a high school teacher, history teacher. Believe me, 18-year-old me wants to know exactly the same thing. I didn't wake up one day with a sudden desire to become a teacher. Instead, it was a very gradual series of changes, all of which began my senior year in college. I went to American University in Washington, D.C. I loved D.C. I loved studying international relations. I loved studying abroad. You might be asking how that last one matters. It doesn't. But those of us who did study abroad signed a contract that we will talk about it with superiority for the rest of our lives. Everything began to change when I started looking at job fairs. Obviously, the vast majority of employers for international relations jobs are government or government-adjacent businesses. At table after table, I was told to just walk away if I didn't have a master's degree. This was right after 9/11, and the government only wanted the most highly qualified individuals as they struggled with this new challenge we were facing. I was not interested in staying in school for another year or two in order to achieve this, so I started looking for other opportunities after college. I'm not sure how I made this decision, but I guess I decided that if I was going to make one change, why not make a lot of changes? The job market was awful, and I couldn't find a job, so I decided to move with a friend to New York City. This is where I offer up my first piece of life advice. I had an internship, and when I mentioned that I was thinking of making this big leap, my supervisor told me, there's only 2 times in your life you should live in New York City, when you're old and rich, or when you're young and poor. And you're not guaranteed old and rich, so do it when you're young and poor. Solid advice, so I did. If I had to characterize my first year in New York, I think I would politely call it rudderless. My entire high school and college careers, I knew I was meant to work in international relations. Now I had to figure out what new path I would pursue. I worked door-to-door sales for a company that was later sued for corrupt business practices. I worked one memorable holiday season at the big Macy's in Herald Square. At one point, I thought about pursuing public relations, which anyone who knows me will tell you is hilarious because I am completely awful at small talk and schmoozing, and I'm way too blunt, or at least my eyebrows are. This is where my next piece of life advice comes from. When I mentioned to my aunt that I thought maybe I wanted to do PR, she set me up to meet the head of PR at her company. The man was super nice, but I think he could tell within 5 minutes that this was not going to be a good fit. However, I will never forget what he said to me. I'm paraphrasing a bit because I'm saying this in public to a bunch of young people, but he told me not to focus so much on figuring out what to do with my life. That's too much pressure when you're 22. Instead, he said, your 20s should be about having a job that pays the rent and allows you to have fun. Worry about figuring out your life when you're 30. Solid advice. So I did. Thanks to that same aunt, I was connected with a partner at one of the largest law firms in Manhattan, and he put my name in for the paralegal program. Now, if you know about paralegals, you might be thinking that I have some sort of degree in that. Nope. Instead, we joked that we were the highest paid copy machines in all of New York. I figured out pretty quickly that I had no desire to be a lawyer, but I followed PR man's advice and kept making that great paycheck. I made some amazing friends, I explored the city, I paid my rent, and I enjoyed my 20s. As I got closer to my 30s, I started to think about what I wanted to do with my life. I knew I didn't want to stay as a paralegal. The money was great, but the environment at my firm towards paralegals can best be described as toxic. My apartment was wonderful, but my quality of life was terrible. Then one day, one of the attorneys I had worked with for like 8 years commented that I was a great teacher. By this time, a big part of my job had been to train the new paralegals for the huge trials we were constantly working on. She said that I was the best at training the new kids. This got me thinking and reflecting on my life. I realized in a way I hadn't before how much of my life had been spent teaching in one way or another. I helped coach figure skating. I tutored people in high school and in college. I spent years training new paralegals. I decided, in another one of those insane leaps that I still can't believe I took, to apply to grad school to be a teacher. I was accepted at Monmouth. I found out because the woman who would go on to be my advisor called me at work, told me I was accepted, but that she refused to sign me up for the elementary school program, which I had applied for. Instead, she was putting me in secondary history. I thank this woman every single day. If you do or want to teach young children, I am in awe of you. Little kids are terrifying. I could never. So this is how I ended up as a history teacher. Not somewhere I ever thought I'd end up, but there hasn't been a single day since I started that I regret this path. There have been moments and there have been hours, but there have never been full days. The theme for today's event is Metamorphosis. So here's where I would like to offer up my last piece of advice. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to take big leaps. It's okay to not know what you want to do and just take your time to figure it out. It's okay to want to change who you always thought you were and become someone you never expected to be. That's what life is all about. And yeah, I'm not making the money like 18-year-old me wanted to, but tell me who has more of an impact on saving the world than teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Spivey, for teaching me an important lesson, as you have done many times in the past before. It's okay to change your mind. Next up, we have Mr. Siegel with his speech titled, The Most Important Thing I Learned.
I always knew that I wanted to be a teacher, but I wasn't always sure that I was allowed to be a teacher. I knew I could do it. I love interacting with people. I love mentoring and working with students, and I love learning new things. But there are barriers and roadblocks, some of them self-imposed, some of them real, to so many dreams and adventures that we go through throughout our lives. So let's rewind. I grew up competitively figure skating and spending hours at a rink every day. From the age of 7 to 21, I was around people that looked, sounded, and acted like me. As I got older, it was clear that I could have a future coaching and training skaters while being an out gay man, which honestly, I hadn't even figured out myself just yet. But I knew that I had role models on and off the ice that showed me I might have a future. And that future sounded accessible, and that future sounded realistic. Being a teacher and being in education, we know that students crave to see themselves reflected in their teachers, and we know that students deserve to see themselves reflected not only in their teachers, but in every facet of public schooling: books, bulletin boards, and even math problems. So I signed up for Latin when I went into high school. I told my parents that it was a smart move because it would give me a better vocabulary and I'd score higher on the SATs. Getting by in Spanish or French wouldn't help me get into a good college, but Latin might. But now for the real reason I signed up for Latin. I was sitting in my middle school auditorium, and we were watching presentations from the world language teachers to sell us on their classes for next year. I was captivated by one of the teachers up on the stage, but I wasn't entirely sure why. I grew to realize that he represented a future I had only seen on a short list of TV shows and movies that I would watch all by myself. It's not like they were rated R or inappropriate, but they did depict gay people in a positive way. And these glimpses of myself on a 24-inch Panasonic TV screen in our half-finished basement were the closest I had to positive reinforcement that I would have a real place in the world. I ended up taking Latin for all 4 years of high school. Was I proficient in Latin? Meh. Did I learn enough Latin to pass TCNJ's entrance exam? No. But I will tell you a little secret from the teacher's perspective. It is obviously important that students learn skills and the content in their math or their English or their science class. But it's much more important that students learn flexibility, acceptance, and that they deserve a sense of belonging in those math, English, and science classrooms. And this is the most important thing that I learned in my 4 years of Latin. My teacher was unabashedly himself. He didn't care about judgment or anyone else's opinion of him. And suddenly, I saw myself reflected in a person that had the career that I had only dreamed of. I could picture myself as a teacher, as that mentor to students, and as a positive role model for others. And that was life-changing. That self-imposed roadblock was taken away. And suddenly, a career in education sounded accessible, and a career in education sounded realistic. And that's exactly what I want to be for our growing population of LGBTQ students that I have the honor to meet every year. A mirror for themselves to see their identities and experiences in a positive and uplifting way, to be able to look at privilege that they historically do not have and find how those unique traits give them strength. I work to do this every day as a classroom teacher, hope to give teachers the capability to do it while I was an instructional coach. And now as a curriculum supervisor, I want to continue to impart this advice on my teachers so that they create opportunities for students through their words, resources, and all the supports that they built. So I've never shared this story or experience with my Latin teacher, but he knows that I'm in education, and we've had the chance to catch up a few times since I graduated high school and college. But if I could, this is what I would say to him. Thank you for doing something that you unknowingly did. Thank you for being that mirror for me and for some of my classmates. And thank you for being the window and sliding glass door for so many other of my peers. Without you being that role model and mentor, the trajectory of my life would be vastly different. And there's no way to sum up how much you influenced me to be the teacher and the leader that I am today. And I hope, but I also think that he would be proud of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Siegel, for your speech on the importance of role models, as all the teachers who have spoken here today are, for me, role models of all shapes, sizes, colors, genders, and sexualities. While we're thanking everybody, I would like to thank everybody who is in the audience here with me today. I would love to thank the teachers for being here to speak. I would like to thank EBTV for coming here to film. And I would like to thank all of you for watching here today. The point of this coffee conversation was a little selfish for me. As I explore what I want to do in the future, had a very tough time. I've changed my major maybe 12 and a half times now. And it's still likely going to change some more. But hearing these teachers speak on events that had importance in their lives made me reflect more on what's important to me. So if you're a senior like me who's debating what you want to do for the rest of your life, maybe rewind. Go back. There are a lot of things that were said here today, and there are so many lessons that can be taken away. But if we're speaking on the topic of metamorphosis, then I think the most important lesson to be learned is that change is only what you make of it. So make it a good one. Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.